All right, we're live with my Explorers hot take tier list. Although not really hot take anymore, it's a pretty cold take. Explorers been out for a while. We've gotten some good play in them. We've seen the titles around. And I kind of want to just I'm going to start doing this for each faction. Maybe we'll have one final big episode at the end where we beam around, drink, and just place models in random spots all over the place for it to tally uh, for in total of all of the masters. But good lord, it's a huge list. So we're going to take this faction by faction. I'll be trying to get guests on to talk about factions I'm not well experienced in, but this is my faction, and I figured I want to get this out. I want to start this series going, and I've been having trouble scheduling times with people because real life happens. But ignoring that, I think we're just going to dive right into it. This is going to be a pretty short video is my goal. I'm going to talk about each master. I'll bring up their card. I'll slot them in where I think they believe in. And yeah, we're just going to quickly take it away. So, oh, nope, not the cards. Don't want that shown yet. We're going to bring in our tier list right here. And we're going to take it away. Starting out with Cooper. I say Cooper, but McCabe is the one on there. So let's just go get our look at our glorious McCabe. I think McCabe is perfectly fine. I think McCabe 2 in particular is a little bit better, especially in the Explorers faction. I think if you're playing Explorers, you're not really playing McCabe all too often. I think he's never bad, especially now that the Scheme Runner potential in Explorers is nerfed, now that Beep Calypso is kind of trash. That you're going to be relying much more on McCabe and maybe Rough Riders and the Wastrels to move around the map better. That being said, unlike 10 Thunders McCabe, you don't have access to the good models, and this is going to really work for both of them. So even though I like McCabe too, I'm really just going to be slotting him in right at A. I think he's definitely good. I think the only changes I would make is not to the master himself, but to the crew. It needs to be a little better. Or maybe when we see some better minion takes that the upgrades can get out to. Or even, just maybe there's a sleeper minion I'm not really known about. I'll admit this is the one I don't really play in Explorers almost ever. That being said, New McCabe though is pretty good, so he's definitely pretty good at Explorers. I've seen him a little bit. I've played against him. He never felt that amazingly strong, but he never felt bad. And for that reason, I'm also just putting the other McCabe in B tier. He's just honestly, in my opinion, a worse version for what Explorers need from McCabe. You really, really want those 10 Thunders models, and you're not really getting any benefit in Explorers. A Flush with Cash is a cool upgrade, not one you really need. So we're just going to move on from there onto Jedza. I don't really like Jedza 1. I've been pretty vocal about this. Jedza 1 is a really good clump mechanic, but the problem being GG2 is very scheme and strat more oriented on moving out and interacting. And being in a bubble is not great, especially since there's so much good models that love fighting against people in bubbles right now. Sonya's really strong. Dashel's really strong. Howard can do some pretty annoying things if you're in bubbles. Hell, even the base in here is pretty good at it. EVS is just a better bubble strat. So pretty much everything Jedza does, someone in this faction does better. Sure, the models never die, but not great. So I'd put Jedza 2 at weak but playable, and or Jedza 1 at weak but playable. Going kind of with the system that was built here, because other people didn't really like my system of rating things. But whereas Jedza 2 can go up to B. Her irreducible damage is great. Depending on your local TO, Grave Goo, along with the Kurigan, which is a great new model, can make the aura damage 1, hazardous 1. Same with the Geoid. So in that scenario, I would really buff her up to A, but this is going to be a TO ruling, so it really hovers between these two. I think it does most of what Jedza wants, but better because it doesn't rely on absolutely so much of the synergies of staying alive. You can hire different models, spread out more, and really rely on just Jedza being able to go in there and beat the crap out of something. So I would actually put it above McCabe. I would almost put it an A if the Grave Goo works, because slap flush with cast a Grave Goo, getting the aura, good things are now happening. Cooper is who we're going to move on to next. Cooper's a very strong model. I don't like him the greatest because he's a very he almost feels all or nothing. Statistically, he's really reliable. The 357 with focus, with the extra plus the damage if you need it, can really almost always guarantee that you're getting like that severe for 7, at least a moderate for 5. That being said, it is still just stat 6. There's a lot of models that you can't consistently hit. There are henchmen who are stoning and hardening to wound you to still be at a negative flip. And even then, if you just tie and they stone you, like 6 isn't as clutch. It's nice that it's min 3, but overall, it's kind of questionable. And therefore, I don't like it from my personal playstyle. I think his crew is really strong right now. The Crypts cores have always been one of the most best models in Explorers. Highly underrated. Would love to see more of them play. But I think he's suffering again from that gaining grounds problem we talked about just a little bit earlier with Jedza. It's really schemes and strat heavy. Cooper wants to stay in his deployment zone. There are very few matches where he's allowed to do that and still interact. That being said, he has Uller and he has a few other good models. I'm willing to slam this master in A tier. I don't really think he needs any changes himself. I would love to see some more model support for him. The Hyperion Eagles are pretty good models for doing some of that scheme running, and sometimes just doing nice massive damage. If Red Jokering for their bonus action can just do some nice surprise. I think 6 damage if you Red Joker. So they're pretty good, and they sometimes have a higher upside. I don't think you can really go wrong with this model. Just being able to slap adversary onto an enemy really allows you to have a lot of control. It's just going to be finding out how to score points or what does the board look like. For a similar reason, Cooper 2 is also pretty strong. I don't know if I would put her higher or lower than the title Cooper. They do slightly different things. You can go more in onto the beast thing, maybe a little bit of hand destruction with the hunter's bow, because if they can't gain adversary because they already have it, they have to discard the card. And so it's a little bit more interesting and I think more consistent than the other Cooper. Stealth, obviously, just an amazing defensive ability. And I think you have a lot of potential. Again, this is going to be more reliant on his crew. And that's what I'm going to say about most X's. Most X's crews just aren't that good. And they really relied on the versatile models being good. But that's just me whining about X's some more. So I'll talk about a little bit more of the positive sides. Call the Wild is just a great ability. The Create Trap really works synergistically well with the Crypsis cores. Creating the whole hazardous aura all the way around them. There's a lot of actually interesting things you can do with this crew that aren't really seen much. There's a few pit trap builds that are very unique and interesting that maybe once I start making build videos, I'll talk about one of those, because there's a fun things you can try with Cooper. I think it's good. I don't really have much experience with new Cooper 2, but it always felt solid. I don't see a reason that it really needs a buff right now. It just doesn't feel competitively viable yet. And I really think that can change with the gaining grounds change instead of a pure buff to the card. And I think that's what I'm going to say about a lot of Exes stuff. They really are not a fan of this gaining grounds. But moving on, we're going to go to Anya. Anya, all-around solid beater. Really gets screwed over if they stay into her crew. I don't really like her. I think she needs buffs. Most of what she does is nice, but she does it slowly. And she's really frail. The whole crew's really frail. There's some fun models you can hire and do silly things with, I don't know, Model 9 for scheme running and stratting. But overall, it's the same problem that I'll talk to death. Her crew in particular does feel especially weak and sad to hire. Anya 2 changes that a little bit, the whole Draugr summon stuff. You see how amazing it works in Tony. The downside is it just doesn't work in her crew that much. You don't have a lot of the same ability to just cycle, I guess, as much. Draw more cards is one of the actual bigger problems in Explorers, especially now that you almost never hire Archivists. You don't have good draw mechanics. It's just really kind of questionable how you're making your Draugrs and where you're making them. That it's just not, it doesn't feel as reliable as Tony can do it, for example. Expert Control needs an enemy. It would be pretty, obviously, it could arguably just be broken if it was friendly. That being said, overall, it can still do good things. I put it at maybe needing slight buffs in order to start getting into the competitive viable tier, but I don't think it needs that many slight buffs. I think it can really just start working if maybe someone finds like a specific crew it works really well with. Maybe there's some out of keyword models I'm not really paying attention to that works really well with her. But at the moment, similar problems Anya was having. Her crew itself isn't that great. They get hurt a lot. The Draugrs aren't really coming in as easily. Therefore, you're not getting the heals like you would be getting in Tony. And you're just kind of like, eh. Base. You guys see me play it. You see me play it the trap list. Base 2, not very good at the trap list. I put him kind of down here. He's honestly just kind of a worse version of base 2 for doing that. And I think that's the best list. There are some cute things you could do with base. He's not terrible. Most of the stuff I'm putting in B is really just like, if they have a good scheme and strat list, they're definitely viable, but otherwise they need a buff to stay on that tier. And that's where he's at. He's at a spot where his models are fine. He does fine things. Everything is fine. You need to do broken things. He doesn't do broken things. Base 2 kind of does a couple of broken things. The tornadoes are just really good. The Order in the Badlands is pretty good. Having marker removal, mass marker removal, pretty good. You got the TN penalty, very good. There's a lot of times that's just terribly punishing. And with the trap list in particular, he's pretty good. I'll put him at A. I don't really think he needs a change. I think he needs a crew-ish change to be slightly better, but him as a model overall just does good things. His gun is a decent 245. The fact that he can have everyone around him ignore concealment is really good. You're never suffering these negatives. All you have to do is worry about friendly fire, and there are some models that just make it so that you don't have to worry about that. The traps being one of them. So I really like this model. I think you can play it in a couple of good lists. I think the trap list is pretty much it. I think there's some viability elsewhere with a similar Cryptus core list. The downside is Cooper does that better. So I think what base does best is the trap list. If you don't want to use the trap list, just play Cooper. I think he's a better range gunman. But you never know. I think you're not terrible off playing some of the Cooper models, especially because some of the frontier models like Rough Riders are, pretty decent, but they're also in our keyword, so or in our faction. So you've got some good models in the keyword. It's just, it mostly comes down to the fact that the trap spam list is really good. Oh, right, I can't pull up traps with the Explorer tab on. Clockwork Traps, really good. Hunting Party, really good ability. Just the fact that they're Armor 2-1. I can't talk about this enough. You see me play the list. It's good. We know it's good. and it can do pretty degenerate things. Now, onwards to some of the best masters. Maxine. Not trash, not amazing. She's I don't even know where I'd rate her. This is one of the ones I waffle on the most. I'm not a fan of Maxine 1. I've talked about it to a lot of people, and I'm not there yet on her. There's some potential where I don't know, her specific abilities to treat the cards as ones is like huge, and it can be. It's just one more of those like get lucky masters where like when it goes off, it feels amazing, but when it doesn't, you just feel behind. And I'm not the biggest fan. Honestly, I would almost be willing to put her at like high B, low A. I would want to see some changes to this card, honestly. I'm not a fan, and that's exactly where I'm gonna put her. I don't know what I can give you specifics about her. She's definitely playable. You could probably solo her in a tournament. If you get really good with her, you can be really good with her. But overall, most of what she does just gets outclassed, in my opinion, by her title. Some people are going to disagree with me with this. I'm going to slam this title an S. I think the need nerfs is going to... I'm going to change that to... I'm just going to change that to OP. I don't really know if need nerfs is the greatest way to paraphrase this. She's definitely top tier competitive viable is what I'm going to put S in. She's able to play with the other quote unquote broken masters right now that arguably need nerfs. She's on that tier. It's a huge tier. So I don't really want to say it's like super OP broken. There's a lot of them. Most factions have more than one actually on that level. It just feels like we got the titles really paced out a lot of masters. And so there's just like this new bracket up top that's decently populated. So when it feels healthy competitive wise, honestly, from like decisions, especially because some of like these A tiers can really put up a good fight against them in specific schemes and strats. It's just like obviously stands out above in how reliable they are, regardless of schemes and strats, I think. Is what I would really make S. They're good regardless of streams and strats. I don't have to like waffle on them like, oh, is this a good schemes and strat for them? It's like, no, they can do it. I might change a couple of the models in her keyword, but if you bring Maxine, you can solo her pretty easily by herself. Her other title doesn't matter much to her. She can come in, she can win things. The ability to see top cards is amazing. The ability where she comes back to life is also amazing. Being stat, 8 is just really nice on some of her abilities. It's just really good stuff all around. Like hitting people with 2, 3, 5 injured, relevant triggers. The rest of her crew is at a pretty decent spot when they start healing. I think that's really what turned on the crew because it's a lot of armor, a lot of shielded, and the biggest problem is they kind of wanted to clump, but they would die. And now you're going to see a lot of ping healing, keeping things just alive, that it's going to become really, really annoying to deal with this crew. And as we've seen, abilities like Calculate the Possibilities, where you get to rig the top of the deck, is always a very strong ability. And the fact that it draws you a card on top of that, I mean, it's just so consistent what you can do with her in turn. You get to see so much information. And she has good damage in the crew to back up this information and good ability to get it out. And once she really wants something dead, you can't heal it. It's going to start having injured on it. Massive Tentacles being a stonable trigger instead of, relying on getting the good card with Beeb Calypso or obviously it was so good on Thriller Driller, they had to take it off. So having it on your stat 6, targeting Willpower Master is just going to be very, very strong. Obviously, Harness the Ley Line isn't like amazing because it doesn't work on your Aetheric Tear, your melee attack, but it is really nice for making sure you get that more healing out, as well as, all of her other amazing triggers. So, um, yeah, very strong, very good, does important things, is viable against the other top masters, and I think you can pretty much take this master wherever you want. Ivan, the golden child of explorers. For the longest time, it was literally just you just play Ivan, and you can win any game you wanted. Now you actually have to think about what you're going to do. And honestly, I think at the moment you just don't play Ivan. I've debated putting him in B, listening to other people talk about him, but I really, really, really want to put him in C, and that's probably wrong. I think he honestly can have better showings than Anya. He's definitely have a better showing than Jedza. So if I'm committing to how this tier list looks, I think I'll just slam him in B. Honestly, B seems like the biggest cop out to me because I'm really thinking like S is the masters I always want to play and would try to solo, and A are the ones I would want to learn to like play in certain pools, and then everything else is just like meh. You can play it if you want. It won't be smart to. Almost ever there's a better alternative, but you can play it if you want, and that's where Ivan ends up being. You can play it if you want. I'll slam Ivan. I don't know, guys. I'm gonna. Oh, God, this feels bad doing because they just got Jin Bakura, which is such an amazing model. It just doesn't do much for Ivan. Ivan has a specific purpose, and I'll get to that a little bit later with our last master I'm going to be talking about. But at the moment, I'm just going to put Ivan middling B. He just needs a couple of the nerf specs. I'll put him in between the Anyas, actually. I think in between the Anyas is a pretty good spot for him. He just needs a couple of the buff specs. Encroaching Shadow, change it so he could target himself again. Maybe, yeah. Maybe or bring the damage back on his summon. I think losing that was pretty huge. I just like a small change I think needs to be done to him. I think he was definitely hit too hard. The nerf to the Brockens I felt like almost was all he needed to be shunted from like S tier to A tier in my mind. Because he lost the consistency part of his crew, which is really what I'm going to be talking at when I want that S tier rating. You have to be consistent, and Brocken's consistent damage is what, obviously what brought him there. Ivan 2 is a lot easier for me to decide. This guy's trash. He's cool looking. This model's horrible. You can't. It's like they just like forgot about some of the rules, which fair. I think everyone did. The fact that you don't get the Deva place attack because, for those who don't know, once per activation, effects can only happen during a model's turn. Ivan's upgrades summon these models outside of anyone's activation, so they can't trigger once per activation stuff. This includes the obey. So if you obey somebody with the upgrade, you can't charge with them. That's trash. Just change it. And it doesn't help that I'm just not a fan of the rest of his card. I mean, there's some very cute things you can do with moving models around, but it just doesn't get close to standing up to the S tier models. I don't even think he can stand up to most of the A tier models. Could this arguably be in B? Maybe. But it's just so bad, especially with his rules not really like working for itself, that it feels like it's shooting itself in the foot, that I don't even want to put it there. It just feels bad. I might be underrating it because of how it feels bad, but God, I'm saying it so many times. It feels bad. But other than that, it swaps around. If you can't remove Mordrake, he becomes annoying. But if you just can kill Mordrake, then The displacing stuff is cute. Distracted's cute. A lot of ways of removing conditions nowadays, especially in top crews, because McMorning's important, Sonya's important. I mean, hell, Colette too. You have to care about distracted removal. Most crews have some way of dealing with stuff. I don't know. I don't think it's cute enough. It just doesn't do enough. Especially it doesn't help that the Umbra keyword is just trash. Like it's a bad keyword. Almost all the models are just bad. Eva is not that great unless you can faster. Gibson's amazing in other keywords. Honestly, one of the Cooper lists I was kind of talking about involves just hiring Gibson and a Nocturne so you can fast focus like Crypsis course. It's really strong, and even when he's not giving fast out, just focusing Cooper is really good. Like there's a lot of like different plays you can have by just having Gibson outside of his keyword, because what you're doing is pretty much just going to be hiring that keyword into Ivan. And then the question is Ivan, especially Ivan 2, a better master than any of the masters above it? Would you rather just hire Gibson outside of his keyword along with a Nocturne or something, or just play Ivan? And the answer is probably the former. Like you don't need this model as your master, really. Obviously, he turns on scheming a little bit better than any of the ones, but since he can't like drop one uniquely, if your master is your scheme runner, it's not great. So I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to put him in C. I don't think you're going to be seeing this model much, except for the fact that he looks cool and he's one of the titles that are already out. But I've played against him multiple times now. I've tried him once. I just have won every game against him, and it wasn't even close. It was just slaughters. Partially because I was playing Mei Feng and other good Arcanist masters, but I mean, that's the whole point of a tier list, right? Can it match up to the other top tier masters? And the answer is it doesn't even get close to. It doesn't feel like I'm playing a game. It feels like I'm just, winning. I'm just playing by myself. So, there he is. Onwards to my former love, my favorite crew, the one that tilted the hell out of every game, the one that people had huge problems with, because quite frankly, I get that it could be a negative play experience. It's a hard crew to play. If you're not really good at it, you can't play it fast enough. You can't play it fast enough. You go to time. If you go to time, quite frankly, you lose. Because you weren't good at scheming, because your crew doesn't really do it very well. And I don't think Nexus is any good anymore, guys. I've talked about this a lot. I honestly think Nexus is unplayably bad. I almost want to put it in trash. I created that tier, I guess, largely because there are a couple masters in the future that legitimately are actually trash, and I think you can get close to putting Nexus here, but she's not actually. The rest of her crew synergy still work pretty well, still hard to play against. That I'm going to keep her at weak. It's weak but playable still. There are some scenarios where it's good. There are some people who are going to get tilted out by it, and you're going to win against some people. And it's not to the level of like a guaranteed loss if you play against like an A or S tier master. It's, good play can get you around, but losing the ability to make more husk was huge. Losing Archivist to being just a web marker creator is pretty annoying for the crew. The whole bonus action Citizens of Malifaux change pretty heavily impacts them. Having them be mindless really means it's harder to get the chains in the correct spots. You don't have the lures to move people up the board. It's just a problem. Like, it's really a problem. You don't have the consistency you had before. But there are still some shells of the crew that are pretty decent, because moving bottles around with exoskeleton connection and drawing cards is still good. Husk are still good. Meredith creating a husk is still good. It's just her as a master is just so much worse and just not consistent anymore, that you really need to take huge advantage of either luck or playing against like maybe a B tier master where the game's going to be a lot closer, because the power levels are a lot closer. But if you start playing against those S tier masters, I really don't think you have any shot of winning. I think that's pretty much kind of what I come down to. My C tier is like even B tier. You can play against an S tier master, good skill, good play, can outdo it. This isn't going to be able to do that. And to hit my final master, bam, easy. I almost put it higher than Maxine. Nexus Kids is so good. It's so much wounds, so much AP, so much movement. The crew does everything you need. The consistency comes in the sheer fact that you just have so much value. And like we talk about like Nexus out skeletal move, join the not join the hive, play things. It's just such an amazing ability where you can literally move your whole entire crew. I've done this on corners where I just keep everyone in a line of sight circle, and you just push everything forward. It kind of helps that they're height 1, so you can have all these height 1 models in the middle, surround them by the big height 2, height 3 models, and then you just move them up the center. One after another. You can do some really good things with this. They can hide in corners. They can hide around. They can hide behind other models, so they're actually decently hard to pick off. And when they want to go out, you can just play things, move your whole crew out, and then get a couple drain lives off. Once you start getting parasite tokens on people, it almost is like a feels worse moment than when Nexus had them, because you can stop so many more things. You're always threatening their TNs, or is like part of the huge part. You're playing against a summoner, and you're like, oh, you think that card's going to summon, or are you going to cheat the higher card? And it's just, good lord, it's just so obnoxious. Yeah, it's very strong. The fact that the removing the parasites after they decide to cheat Fate or not is really like the deciding factor. Because as I talk about, it's like, oh, I'm going to summon these models, and you just go, no, you're not. And it's the constant threat of that, as I was talking about. It's like, oh, do I have to cheat even though I'm winning this duel? Should I cheat higher just so I win this duel, even though and you can remove a parasite token? And if they do that, you obviously can keep the parasite token on them, and you just spiral on. And this is going to be the big thing I was mentioning about Ivan. Ivan, while now is pretty meh, amazing as a second master still. If you are in a crew that play this, I really think EVS has one second master, and that's English Ivan 1. And he's particularly good in Nexus, where you can hire him as your second master, and then you can summon off of stat 6 willpowers with your stat 6, and you reduce them to stat 4. Because you're not actually lowering their stat, so you're still getting your Brocken summon, even though it's a lot more depressing. You're probably actually just getting a Deva, because they're kind of just better models than Brockens now. And you can do really great things. Yeah, really love Nexus. Second Master Ivan is a great thing for Nexus, one of many. Even more AP efficiency, even more models, and obviously your abilities for scheme runners are decently low now that Ivan is just actually pretty good at that sometimes. A couple of things I would say to take note of this particular crew. I've played it a lot, really enjoy it. Make Conversation, the ability to heal a model within 3, is not enemy only, so you do actually are kind of incentivized to attack your own models and get that heal flip, and maybe, heal up a model that was being assassinated. I did that before in a few games. It's very important to make sure your master can't be assassinated. Remember to pick which model is actually your leader, not just, a master. And remember it. That's one of the trickier parts of having multiple masters. Other than that, amazing model. Will of Many is great. It did get hurt by the Beeb Calypso nerfs, because that was one of the models that was really nice to take. Because you could pick up the 4 and 5 of Rams for the Will of Many ability in general, really allowing you to make sure Shambling Nest and Eyes of Ears can interact. Highly recommend hiring Meredith and Eyes and Ears to start off the game, just to make a Berserk Husk. I don't even mind hiring a couple, just so that you have the pattern of making a Berserk Husk that can interact with strats, and still score strats and stuff like that. You will be making Eyes and Ears. Depending on your TO ruling, it will change how many Eyes of Ears you can make off of Drain Life. Depending on your TO, if you stack this trigger multiple times on one model and kill it, you can either summon 1 or up to 3 eyes and ears. So check that with your TO whenever you're playing a local tournament. That's going to be an important one to mark. Other than that, I think that's going to be my explorers list. There it is in all of its glory. I think I stand by this for now. Some people might be able to change my mind on moving things up or down a tier. Don't take this as a hard sell. A lot of these masters are legitimately playable in good schemes and strats. Probably not the C tier ones, but I have seen Jedza do some good things. Nexus can potentially do good things. But overall, this was just to get out there for people who are new to the game to look at maybe and be like, oh, these are fine-ish masters to invest in. I really think that is a useful way of looking potentially at the game. I don't know. Honestly, I make these because they get good views, and I think people like seeing them and like arguing about them. So feel free to argue with them. I will defend myself in the comments. Admittedly, it takes me a couple days to look at comments sometimes, but if you want to disagree with me or point out somewhere I'm wrong, I will engage in that discussion with you. I think that there's definitely some volatility to this tier list, especially scheme and strat dependent. I just wanted to get this out there. As I said, I'd get it out there this weekend, even if I couldn't find somebody. And I'm tired of making promises I don't follow through with. So here it is. This is my explorers tier list. I'm going to stick to it.